Most people don't struggle with money because they're bad at it. They struggle because no one ever explained how it actually works. In today. That misunderstanding shows up in something that affects every dollar you earn, every purchase you make, and every financial decision you think. You control inflation and deflation. When most people hear the word inflation, they think of rising prices at the grocery store. Gas gets more expensive. Rent goes up. Your morning coffee cost more than it did last year. And the natural response: blame the government, blame corporations, blame greed. It seems logical, doesn't it? Prices go up. Someone must be raising them. Someone must be taking advantage. On the flip side, when people hear deflation, they think it sounds good. Prices going down, things getting cheaper. That must mean more purchasing power, right? That must mean your money goes further. So why do economists panic when deflation appears? Why do central banks fight deflation harder than they fight inflation? Most people never get a real answer to these questions. They're told inflation is bad. They're told deflation is worse. But no one explains why or how these forces quietly reshape your financial reality without you noticing. Here's what almost no one tells you. Inflation and deflation aren't just about prices going up or down. They're about the behavior of money itself, how it flows, how it's valued, and how entire economic systems respond to its movement. And that behavior doesn't just affect the economy. It affects whether you save or spend, whether businesses hire or fire, whether your debt becomes easier or impossible to pay off. Let me break this down. Inflation isn't simply things cost more. Inflation is the erosion of purchasing power over time. Your dollar buys less today than it did yesterday. But here's the part most people miss. Inflation is designed into the system. Modern economies are built on the assumption that money will lose value gradually. Why? Because when people expect their money to be worth less tomorrow, they spend it today. They invest it. They put it to work. This creates economic activity, jobs, demand, and growth. But deflation is the opposite, and it creates a psychological and economic trap. When prices fall, your money becomes more valuable over time. Sounds great, right? But here's what actually happens. You stop spending. Why buy a car today if it'll be cheaper next month? Why invest in a business if your cash sitting in a bank account gains value by doing nothing? Consumers freeze. Business is cut production. Layoffs happen. Incomes drop. And now, even though prices are falling, people have less money to spend. This creates a deflationary spiral where falling prices lead to falling demand, which leads to more falling prices. This isn't theory. This is what happened during the Great Depression. This is what Japan struggled with for decades. Now here's the part that quietly controls your financial life. You don't control whether you live in an inflationary or deflationary environment, but that environment controls almost every financial decision you make. And most people don't even realize it's happening. Let's talk about what this means in real life and why so many people get trapped without understanding why. Take inflation. Right now, most developed economies target around 1% inflation per year. That sounds small, harmless even, but compounded over time. After 10 years, 2% annual inflation means your money has lost roughly 20% of its purchasing power. After 25 years, nearly half. This is why people who religiously save cash in a regular savings account doing exactly what they we're told still feel like they're falling behind. They are. The system is designed to erode cash savings quietly, year after year. But here's where it gets worse. Most people don't adjust their behavior to match this reality. They save in low-interest accounts that return 0.5% while inflation runs at 3%. They avoid investments because they don't understand the stock market. They think being conservative with money means keeping it liquid and safe. Meanwhile, inflation silently transfers their wealth away, not to anyone specific, just into the void of lost purchasing power. And on the other side, deflation creates its own trap. Imagine you took out a mortgage or student loans when the economy was stable. You borrowed money expecting your income to rise over time, making payments easier. But then deflation hits. Prices fall. Wages stagnate or drop. Your income shrinks, but your debt stays exactly the same. In fact, in real terms, your debt becomes heavier because the money you owe is now worth more than when you borrowed it. This is called debt deflation, and it's one of the most financially destructive forces that can hit an individual or economy. You borrowed when money was cheap. Now you're paying it back when money is expensive. Your debt doesn't shrink with deflation, it grows in weight, even if the number stays the same. And here's the hidden part. Central banks, governments, and corporations all know this. That's why they're terrified of deflation. That's why they'll do almost anything: print money, lower interest rates, stimulate spending to avoid it. But regular people? They're told save more, spend less without understanding that in a deflationary environment, that advice can trap them in a cycle of shrinking income, heavier debt, and economic paralysis. Let me show you how this plays out with two people in the same economic environment. Scenario 1. The cash saver in an inflationary economy meets Sarah. She's responsible, disciplined, and saves 20% of her $60,000 annual income. She keeps it in a savings account earning 0.5% interest because it feels safe and liquid. Over 10 years, she saves $120,000. Impressive, right? But inflation averages 3% during that decade. Her purchasing power didn't grow by $120,000. It grew by far less because every year, the value of her existing savings eroded. In today's dollars, her $120,000 is worth closer to $90,000 in real purchasing power. She lost $30,000 to inflation without spending a single dollar irresponsibly. Meanwhile, her friend Alex took a different approach. Alex saved the same amount but invested in a diversified portfolio, returning an average of 7% annually. After 10 years, Alex has roughly $165,000, adjusted for inflation. That's about $125,000 in real purchasing power. Same income, same discipline, completely different outcome. Why? Because Alex understood that in an inflationary system, cash loses value. You have to put money to work to stay ahead. Scenario 2. The borrower in a deflationary economy. Now imagine Tom. He graduated with $80,000 in student loans when the economy was stable. He expected to pay it off over 10 years as his income grew. But deflation hits. Wages freeze. Companies cut cost. Tom's salary doesn't grow, it actually drops slightly. His $800 monthly loan payment used to be manageable on a $55,000 salary. But now, on a $48,000 salary, that same payment feels crushing. And here's the kicker. Even though prices are falling, his debt isn't. He's paying back money that's now more valuable than when he borrowed it. His debt, in real terms, just got heavier. Over time, more of his income goes to debt. He can't spend on other things. He delays buying a home, starting a family, investing. His financial life is frozen not because he made bad decisions, but because the economic environment shifted under his feet. Compare this to his friend Lisa, who graduated debt-free and kept her savings in cash. In a deflationary environment, Lisa's cash is gaining value. She can wait, watch prices fall, and eventually buy assets, maybe even a house at a discount. Same starting point, completely different outcomes based on one factor: who had debt when deflation hit. Scenario 3. The business owner. Here's one more. Consider the small business owners. In an inflationary environment, Maria's cafe sees rising costs: rent, ingredients, wages. But she can raise prices gradually because consumers expect it. Her revenue grows. Her debt from the initial business loan becomes easier to service, and inflation quietly works in her favor. But in a deflationary environment, her competitor James faces a nightmare. Prices are falling. Customers expect discounts. He can't raise prices without losing business. But his cost, rent, loan payments stay fixed. His margins shrink. He cuts staff. Eventually, he closes. Same business model, different economic environment. One survives, one doesn't. So what does all this mean for you? It means that understanding inflation and deflation isn't just about economics. It's about financial survival. The environment you're in dictates the rules of the game. And if you don't know the rules, you'll make decisions that feel smart but quietly destroy your wealth. In an inflationary environment, cash loses value over time. Debt becomes easier to manage as your income hopefully rises. Investing in assets that grow with or above inflation is essential. Waiting to buy assets means paying more later. In a deflationary environment, cash gains value, debt becomes crushing as incomes stagnate or fall. Spending and investing feel risky because prices might drop further. Economic activity freezes, which makes everything worse. Most people operate with one strategy their entire lives. Regardless of which environment they're in, they save the same way. They invest the same way. They make decisions based on advice that worked in a different era. But the economy doesn't care about your strategy. It only cares about its own behavior. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You can do everything right and still lose if you don't understand the environment you're operating in. So what do you actually do with this information? 1. Know which environment you're in. Pay attention to whether prices are rising, falling, or stable. Watch central bank policy. Understand whether inflation or deflation risk is higher. This isn't about predicting the future, it's about being aware of the present. 2. Adjust your cash strategy based on inflation in an inflationary environment. Holding large amounts of cash is a slow leak. Keep an emergency fund, but put the rest to work in assets that grow: stocks, real estate, inflation-protected securities. In a deflationary environment, cash is king. Preserve liquidity, avoid unnecessary debt, and wait for opportunities as asset prices fall. 3. Be extremely careful with debt in uncertain times. It works in your favor during inflation. It works against you during deflation. If you're taking on debt, understand the risks if the economic environment shifts. Fixed rate debt in moderate inflation? Often fine. Variable rate debt heading into deflation? Potentially disastrous. 4. Diversify not just assets, but strategies to build your entire financial life around one assumption. Have some inflation hedges. Have some liquidity. Have some assets that perform differently in different environments. 5. Stop treating saving and investing as the same thing. Saving is preserving value. Investing is growing value. In an inflationary world, you need both, but cash savings alone will fail you. Here's what most people never realize. Inflation and deflation aren't just economic terms in textbooks. They're invisible forces quietly rewriting the rules of your financial life every single day. You can work hard. You can save diligently. You can follow all the advice you've been given. But if you don't understand how the value of money itself is shifting around you, you'll make decisions that seem smart but quietly work against you. The difference between financial success and financial struggle often is an effort. It's awareness. Once you see how inflation and deflation actually shape your money, your debt, your savings, and your future, you can unsee it. And that's when your relationship with money truly starts to change. If you want more hidden truths about money that nobody else explains, subscribe. Because the system won't teach you this, but we will.